It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Well, hello there. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. I am so excited because today, for the very first time, I was able to get off a joke in Espanol. So I'll try it here. You may not understand it, but that's okay. So the joke goes like this. ¿Qué día es el favorito del gato? So the question is, what day is the favorite of the cat, roughly translated into English? And so the answer is miércoles, because miércoles is the word for Wednesday, but of course I changed it to miaucarles. No, I didn't create this on my own. And yes, it's a very lame joke, maybe even a dad joke kind of thing. But I have actually got to use it on a Spanish speaker that maybe they laughed, which was really nice. But it may have just been that it was so fucking odd coming from someone who looks like me. So I was very happy anyway, kind of pulled that off. So that's an achievement. Another randomly weird thing in my life, I bought a tumbler, The Stanley ones are all the rage, but I just got a cheap one made in China. I'm sure Stanleys are made in China, but maybe they're not. Because I usually use a salsa jar as my glass, and it's nice because it's free, so you don't need to buy glasses if you ever buy salsa. You get a free glass. I think they're fantastic. And if I break it, no foul, because I've eaten more salsa since then, so I have another jar. But the problem is that I put a nice bunch of ice and put some water or a flavored drink in that. And because of the humidity in Central Florida, it does get quite humid, especially in the summer, it was condensating, water was condensating on the glass and making a mess. So I got this tumbler, which insulates, keeps the cold stuff cold and the hot stuff hot. But I mix my drink in that, and no more condensation on the outside. No more mess to clean up. I know. It's the little things in my life that make me happy. So that's fantastic. Coming up later in this show, I'm going to replay the little segment that you may have heard on the SSA, Secular Student Alliance match that my wife and I are doing. And this ends at the end of May, and this is in 2024. And we have up to $10,000 available. And the last update I've heard is that we are still short and don't have enough people who are putting in a match. So please consider doing that. I'm not going to go over it all in the detail because it's in that segment. So we've got that coming up. I have a little segment on Inspire ETF. It is a new large cap U.S. fund that buys stock based on biblical values. I can't even believe that this is a thing. Talk about marketing gimmick. And I do talk about that a lot. A lot of everything that you can buy is, I don't know if they're not all a scam per se, but they're a trick. And this is a trick. It's a marketing gimmick. It's a marketing trick. But they've created some proprietary model that decides which companies are following biblical values and which ones aren't. It's stupid. It's dumb. The reason I talked about it, first of all, because it's based on religion, so it kind of was a perfect fit for me. And I sent an email to the person that sent me the spam, and he responded with great levity. I was impressed, honestly, to be fair. Kudos to you, sir. You responded with, just just professionalism and humor at my response because I had said something like, "Send me everything you got because I'm going to do a segment on my show to mock it." And he says, "Mock all you want, but here's the details," kind of thing. He had more to it, but it was well done. So I just wanted to do that little shout out. The bigger segment today for Skeptically Investing Skeptically, is about managed funds versus index funds. And it's one of those things that I hear on CNBC, which, by the way, I do not recommend that you watch, at least not more than 30 minutes a week or something like that, because everyone they have on there is an idiot. And they often have on people saying, this stock's going to crash or this stock's going to go to the moon. It is market theater, business theater, whatever. I mean, they have to entertain you. And so I don't know if any of the advice is ever any good. Well, some of it's good. You just don't know which one is the good one and which one's the bad one. So you could get really anything out of it you want. Buy more stocks, sell more stocks. Yeah, it's just like reading the Bible, right? You can find anything you want in it. But that segment's going to talk about how and how phenomenal index funds do to managed funds. It's come up with several emails, and a couple of clients have asked me lately, which it's weird how these things come and go over time. And I've done this almost 28 years. And for years, no one said anything negative about index funds. But now I've had a few people say, well, shouldn't we have some managed funds? No, you should not. And that segment talks about why that is. But I am curious, where does this come from? And I've seen on CNBC them saying some things that now is the time for managed funds. It's a stock picker's time, where picking stocks is going to make you more money than the index. And from time to time that may happen, but I'm not trying to invest from time to time. I'm trying to invest in a organized, strategic, followable process, a plan, dare I say, that consistently works pretty darn well in up markets and pretty darn well in down markets. It comes close to maximizing the long-term returns, at least maximizing it without adding a whole bunch of risk. Can people get better returns than what my plan does? Of course. I would wager that most people don't, especially if you're stock picking or using managed funds, because it's really, really difficult to do. I had a listener contact me, and they were curious. They had an account at a brokerage firm, and it was about $100,000. And over the last 2 years, while the market is up some, they only made a teeny bit of gains, and they were concerned about that. So I looked into that and found that when they put in $100,000, this company, this brokerage firm, bought about 20 different ETFs. Regular listeners know that with $100,000, you could probably get by with 3 to 5 funds. You don't need to have all the transaction costs. You don't need to do something elaborate like I do for someone that has $500 or $1 million. With $100,000, 3 to 5 funds should work. And if you want to know what those are, let me know. I can do another segment, but I've talked about that before. But with $1 million or more, my plan gets more elaborate, because you have the opportunity to adjust and rebalance based on market changes. So you still pay attention to the market, at least like annually-ish, not weekly, not daily, not even monthly. And if you want to look at your statements quarterly, fine, but what are you going to do with that information? But you want to have a plan, and you follow that plan. And when you have managed funds, you can't follow your plan because they're going to do whatever the fuck they want to do, and they buy and sell. So that's some thoughts, and you'll hear more about that during that segment. The other thing that I heard that I found amazing, I'm looking at a website here. News Nation happens to be the one that came up. I don't know if they're any reliable or not, and I saw this on a couple other sources. This is just the one I happened to pull to read from today. And here's a couple of numbers. 55% of U.S. citizens believe that the economy is shrinking. False. 56% 56% say the U.S. is in a recession. 55 versus 56. Okay, margin of error between the two. The ironic thing is that if the economy is shrinking, that is a recession. That's the definition. The classic definition is 2 calendar quarters of negative GDP, gross domestic product. Gross domestic product is not down. Therefore, the economy is not shrinking, and we are not in a recession. Both are the same thing, in my opinion. And then what's funny is 58% said that they believe the responsibility lies with President Biden. So, first of all, responsibility of the misinformation that you have, you think Biden is responsible. That's bizarre. Also, presidents have some influence on economic growth, but it's not that much. Political parties and the Senate can have more pull. And sometimes the economy just does what the economy wants to do. So it's just fantastic. They also said that almost half of Americans think that unemployment is the highest it's been in 50 years. Actually, it's around the lowest it's been in 50 years. It's around 4% or a little below. Fantastic numbers. It's considered full employment. Historically, that's full employment. But yet, so many people think that we have record recessions or record unemployment, that the economy is shrinking. Inflation is still higher than the Fed's target that they've set for 2%. Historically, they've wanted to be between 2 and 3%. I think I mentioned last show that producer price index was running 3.5, 3.6%. But since then, the CPI, consumer price index, has come out and shows that inflation is under 3%, at least according to that measure. And it changes over time, and there are adjustments, but it gives you the idea. We also have the weirdness that people think that they'll say something like inflation is still growing. So inflation in and of itself is a measurement of the growth, the increase of prices month to month, year to year, over time. So anytime inflation is positive, prices are going up. So if they say inflation is going up, what that would mean semantically to me, and maybe I'm being over pedantic about this, is that instead of being 3%, it's now 4% or now 5%. So the rate of growth is increasing. So the increasing rate is increasing. Anyway, I just like to be very particular with that. Inflation is a measurement of change of prices over time, and it's low. Now, that low inflation, the current rate of 3%, let's say plus or minus 3%, does not decrease the prices that jumped up over the last couple of years. We had for a year or year and a half inflation of 7, 8, 9%. And I've seen some studies of grocery shopping bills that people are paying 20, 30, 40% more than they were 4 years ago. And that sucks, especially if your budget is small, if your income is limited, if you're on a tight budget, that's a big fucking deal. But inflation is not growing. Inflation still is positive. And generally speaking, most economic theories suggest that a very small positive inflation is better than a negative inflation. Although there's a lot of people who would argue that maybe decreases of prices by 10 or 15% would be really nice to have. No doubt about it. And in case you are new to the show, I want to make an extra moment here to say, I think a big part of the problem, of course, is the conservative media feeding lies to knock Democrats and Biden in particular and promote Der Fuhrer Trump, who wants to be a dictator only on day one. And I think it was Palpatine said something like, when these problems are over, he will gladly give back the power that he's taken in the short term. So if you think that the economy is in the shitter, if you think our borders are letting in terrorists, you might be willing, as a lot of people apparently are, to put in somebody like Trump, who you think is a strong man, because he will ignore the rule of law. He'll do what is necessary because right now, in the short term, we need a dictator. That's some bad fucking math, people. That's a really serious fucking problem. So anyway, that's where we are. The economy is strong. Oh, I got distracted myself. I wanted to make sure I made perfectly clear the point for anyone who's new to the show. While the economy is strong and the markets are up, I recognize, and I want you to recognize, that the economy is not, I'll just say it straight, is not fair to everyone. And the difference between the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer is a serious fucking problem that we need to fix. As a general rule, I don't really think we need billionaires. Okay, make all the money you want, but at some point you should pay your fair share. And there are billionaires and millionaires that pay taxes at much lower rates than people that work for $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 a year. That's wrong. We should fix that. I think not only should the really wealthy pay their fair share, they should pay a fairer share, because a lot of people make a lot of money by taking advantage of workers, taking advantage of opportunities and growth. And sometimes they just happen to be in the right place at the right time and they got really lucky. Good for them. Maybe they took huge risks. Maybe they worked 100 hours a week for years. Cool. I get it. But now you've done well. You've made a fortune. And I'm not saying we should take your fortune away, but you should pay the same rate as everybody else and maybe something a little higher. I know some listeners aren't going to like this part of the monologue, but that's where my mind is. Minimum wage should be higher, and we should tax the really wealthy more, at least more than what someone who is working a conventional job makes in a year. The rate should be higher. Whew. All right. Well, send your hate mail if you want to, but I'm going to wrap this intro up and we're going to get into the actual show. So don't go anywhere. Oh, you guys, I failed to mention this. So I should have mentioned it each and every episode. So I'm going to extend it. What I'm talking about is the matching funds that myself and my wife, Robin, are doing for the SSA. In case you didn't hear it a few episodes ago, just a quick reminder, anyone that starts a new monthly contribution to the SSA or increases their current monthly contribution to the SSA, Secular Student Alliance, in either one of those scenarios, we will match that with a $150 donation. So the address, the website you would go to is secularstudents.org/Phil. You go to that website, follow the instructions, and you can set up your own contribution. So if you give 10 or more a month, or add 10 or more a month to your current contribution program, we will donate $150. So you could sign up and give $10 a month. It's $120 in a year. If you can't afford it, fine, don't do this. But I know a lot of you that are listening can do this, so please. If you do that $10 a month, we will match that with an additional $150 that the SSA gets right away. I just put out an email to Kevin to see where we are. The last time we talked, I think we're somewhere around 20 or 25 people that signed up. Other people use the program to contribute just cash and not sign up for a recurring monthly payment. And that's cool. But the match is for recurring monthly payments because we want this to become a pattern where you regularly give a small amount, but you give it every month, because groups like the Secular Student Alliance need a regular cash flow so they can know how to fulfill their staffing needs, their supplies. It's great. I mean, if you just want to contact them and forget my little promotion and give them $10 million, let me know. I'll tell you who to talk to. But what I want is a lot of people involved. I know, as regular listeners to this show, you understand the importance very, very important thing of contributing to these organizations so they can help people in need. And maybe you only got out of college a couple years ago. Maybe you got out of college 40 years ago or something like that. But you may recall if you went to college, and you definitely would know if you went to high school, that the pressure can be immense. And for a lot of students, a lot of young adults, it feels like you're the only one. I want to reduce that pain. I want to have more students know that they're not the only one. They're not the crazy one. It's the people pushing religion. And all the religions disagree with each other, so they can't all be right, but they can, and probably are, all wrong. So, once again, I am asking you, I am imploring you, and we're going to drag this out till May 30th? Wait, may have 31 days? May 31. Because the conference comes after that, and I want them to have the money. But I also don't want to wait. So there's still a few days left, but I am going to go ahead and send, I know it's at least 20 people have signed up. So 20 times 150 is $3,000. So we're going to send $3,000 right now. But you have until the end of May 2024 to go to secularstudents.org/Phil and set up a monthly contribution. $10 a month. A lot of you can do more than that. And if you want to do more than that, that's fantastic. Again, like I said, if you just don't have the cash flow available, don't worry about it. It's not for you. But a lot of you do. So secularstudents.org/Phil. We're going to send the $3,000 now. Actually, I'll send it before you even hear this, because it's I'm going to do that in real time. But when Kevin gives me the final number at the end of May, we'll true up to that amount. The total amount we have set aside to do this is up to $10,000. And that would mean that we can help, you can help, send 66.666 students to the summer conference. That's what the $150 goes for. It goes for room and it goes for board. So students, all they have to do is get to the conference. And you can learn more about that on the secularstudents.org website. But if you go to the website /Phil, you can find how to give and get the match for this special program. Like I said, up to $10,000. I know I know at this point I'm out at least $3,000. It's probably going to be a little bit more than that. But what I would hope for is that when you're hearing this and you know of the urgency, because when you hear this, there's only going to be days left in this special promotion. So it's probably going to be the end of May with a week to go, maybe a few days more than that. Please go to secularstudents.org/Phil, sign up to give $10 or more per month, and that will be another match that we will have to meet and send money to the SSA. So if you can help out, we'd really love for you to do that. And I guess that's it. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. I get mail. Yes, and this mail is from a company that wants me to sell their stuff to you. Going to go back to the original thing here. This is for professional use only. Advisor services are offered through Inspire Investing LLC, a registered investment advisor with the SEC, and they have created Inspire ETF. Inspire. And here are some of the things. It says largest 500 U.S. companies by market cap. Inspire impact score of 0 or higher, whatever. No exposure to the Magnificent Seven. And this is very specifically promoted as a faith-based ETF. And they claim to be the lowest cost faith-based ETF on the market. And it just kind of struck me odd, as these kinds of things do. So I sent the guy a snarky email, as I'm also known to do. Please feel free to send any more information. Notice, any additional information sent to me will be deemed as available for public dissemination. I think this fund is hilarious and plan to do a segment on my podcast about this. That's what I wrote in my email to him. So I'm partly covering my ass, partly having a go, if I can say that, at this guy, pointing out that I think this is hysterical, and making sure it's perfectly clear. Anything else he sends me, I'm covered. They can't say that's for industrial use or advisor use only, professional use only, because I said, if you send it to me, I'm going to cover it. I had additional thoughts here. Their first email said the largest 500 U.S. companies by market cap, and then they said no exposure to the Magnificent Seven. So the Magnificent Seven, if you don't know, the brand new word that they've come up with, new title, new name, is for 7 of the biggest companies in the United States of America. And I don't know the exact list, but it is like NVIDIA, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, yada, 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 a couple more companies. That's the Magnificent Seven. And I know I've mentioned it before, so not a surprise to hear me say it right now. As soon as a group of stocks get a name like the Magnificent Seven, I lose interest. Now, it doesn't mean my interest is zero, but my amount of interest declines. That's a better way to say it. My amount of interest declines, or the amount of money I want to have invested in those things would decline, because there's a long historical trend where things that are so popular that everyone knows they're an easy way to make money, they are until they aren't. And I don't like that kind of risk profile. So I got a response. Let's see, how quick was the response? Just a couple days later, pretty good. Hello, Mr. Ferguson. I appreciate your interest in our new fund, even if it is for comic relief. We are happy we can bring a little joy to your day one way or the other. Okay. That was nice. Funny. I greatly appreciated that. So I'm like, all right, very cool. We have an adult here that can understand my opinion. He then goes to point out that they have the 500 largest stocks that pass their Inspire test. So I don't know what it is. You can go to the full holdings. You know what? Let's do that. I'm going to be crazy and click on this link. And the holdings. Where are the holdings? Okay. Here are the holdings. 5% of the portfolio is Broadcom. ExxonMobil. Apparently ExxonMobil is Christian, right? This passes their values. Good for them. Home Depot, Qualcomm, Caterpillar, NextEra Energy, Intuitive Surgeries, Progressive Corporation, United Parcel B. They've got a couple others, but let's see. I can download all of it. I'm not that interested. But it does look like they don't have the Magnificent Seven. And like I said, it is the 7 that they think meet their Christian values. You know what I'm going to do now? Ooh, you get to see my brain in process. I'm going to Morningstar, website I adore. And the ticker symbol for this is PTL. Praise the Lord. Oh my God. Really, you guys? Come on. And I want to look at what this is. Performance numbers. I don't really have performance numbers because this opened literally days ago. So that doesn't help. Let's see. What is the portfolio in general? It is a mix of mid cap and large cap. So they have the 500 biggest It's a play. I mean, I think the promotional thing that they sent me, it's really clear that they mean the S&P 500, but this is not. They just start at the top and work down, and whatever companies pass their wacky Christian criteria, whatever it is, get put in the fund. So their expense ratio was 0.09%, and that's what Morningstar says, so that matches. So it's really low expense ratio. I mean, you could get an S&P 500 that's 0.05 or 0.04, 0.03. This is 0.09. I don't think there's any data yet on turnover. I don't see anything here because it's brand new. But yeah, those companies I read off somehow are more Christian than other companies. If you want this cool, you can go out and buy it. It's not a problem. I don't think it's going to it's not a super shitty fund. At least I don't have any data to call it that category. It just seems like to me a really stupid idea for them to cherry pick which companies they're going to buy and sell. There's a long history of that not working. Oh, I wanted to see here. Net assets, as of now, 118 million. So this ETF is smaller than the assets managed by Polaris Financial Planning, which is pretty fucking small. But, it's out there. Let's see, 30-day yield, very low yield, 0.65%, not even 1%. Price earnings ratio, 25. What else might be interesting here? Average daily volume is pretty small. Shares outstanding. Spread. I thought I saw spread. There it is. Spread is 0.05%. And so that means since it's an ETF, it trades based on supply and demand. So if you want to buy it and there aren't as many sellers, you could end up paying a high price. And if you want to sell it and there's not a lot of buyers, you could get a price below what the net asset value is because of that spread. Let's see, they've got a graph. No, they've got tables for performance history, but there's no performance. It does say it opened on 3/25/24, and I think this performance history, the net asset value, is since launch lost 2%. It's been a rough month. Okay, fair enough. I don't know. Just it was cutesy enough. They have other funds. Maybe I could look at one of those. Maybe they've been around longer, but I'm not interested. But like I said, I greatly appreciated the humor in his response because I was being snarky. So that's the Inspire ETF. I can't recommend it, but it's not a super shitty fund either. So just kind of something fun and a little amusing.
Jesus is here!
Reverend Mesa, Reverend Rock, I'm grateful for your generous invitation to state my views. While the so-called religious issue is necessarily and properly the chief topic here tonight, I want to emphasize from the outset that I believe that we have far more critical issues in the 1960 campaign. The spread of communist influence until it now festers only 90 miles from the coast of Florida. The humiliating treatment of our president and vice president by those who no longer respect our power. The hungry children I saw in West Virginia. The old people who cannot pay their doctor's bills. The families forced to give up their farms. An America with too many slums, with too few schools, and too late to the moon and outer space. These are the real issues which should decide this campaign. And they are not religious issues. For war and hunger and ignorance and despair, no religious barrier. But because I am a Catholic, and no Catholic has ever been elected president, the real issues in this campaign have been obscured, perhaps deliberately, in some quarters less responsible than this. So it is apparently necessary for me to state once again, not what kind of church I believe in, for that should be important only to me, but what kind of America I believe in. I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no Catholic prelate would tell the president, should he be Catholic, how to act, and no Protestant minister would tell his parishioners for whom to vote, where no church or church school is granted any public funds or political preference, and where no man is denied public office merely because his religion differs from the president who might appoint him or the people who might elect him. I believe in an America that is officially neither Catholic, Protestant, nor Jewish, where no public official either requests or accepts instructions on public policy from the Pope, the National Council of Churches, or any other ecclesiastical source. When no religious body seeks to impose its will, directly or indirectly, upon the general populace or the public acts of its officials, and where religious liberty is so indivisible that an act against one church is treated as an act against all. For while this year it may be a Catholic against whom the finger of suspicion is pointed, in other years it has been, and may someday be again, a Jew, or a Quaker, or a Unitarian, or a Baptist. It was Virginia's harassment of Baptist preachers, for example, that led to Jefferson's Statute of Religious Freedom. Today I may be the victim, but tomorrow it may be you, until the whole fabric of our harmonious society is ripped apart at a time of great national peril. Finally, I believe in an America where religious intolerance will someday end, where all men and all churches are treated as equals, where every man has the same right to attend or not to attend the church of his choice, where there is no Catholic vote, no anti-Catholic vote, no block voting of any kind, and where Catholics, Protestants, and Jews, at both the lay and the pastoral levels, will refrain from those attitudes of disdain and division which have so often marred their works in the past, and promote instead the American ideal of brotherhood. That is the kind of America in which I believe.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
Things up like this. If there is a God, if there is, I think most reasonable people might agree that he's at least incompetent and maybe, just maybe, doesn't give a shit. Doesn't give a shit, which I admire in a person and which would explain a lot of these bad results. So rather than be just another mindless religious robot, mindlessly and aimlessly and blindly believing that all of this is in the hands of some spooky, incompetent father figure who doesn't give a shit, I decided to look around for something else to worship, something I could really count on. And immediately, I thought of the sun. Happened like that. Overnight, I became a sun worshiper. Well, not overnight. You can't see the sun at night. But first thing the next morning, I became a sun worshiper. Several reasons. First of all, I can see the sun. Okay? Yeah. Unlike some other gods I could mention, I can actually see the sun. I'm big on that. If I can see something, I don't know, kind of helps the credibility along, you know? So every day I can see the sun as it gives me everything I need: heat, light, food, flowers in the park, reflections on the lake, an occasional skin cancer, but hey, at least there are no crucifixions, and we're not setting people on fire simply because they don't agree with us. Sun worship is fairly simple. There's no mystery, no miracles, no pageantry, no one asks for money, there are no songs to learn, and we don't have a special building where we all gather once a week to compare clothing. And the best thing about the sun, it never tells me I'm unworthy. Doesn't tell me I'm a bad person who needs to be saved. Hadn't said an unkind word. Treats me fine. So I worship the sun. But I don't pray to the sun. Know why? I wouldn't presume on our friendship. It's not polite. I've often thought people treat God rather rudely, don't you? Asking trillions and trillions of prayers every day, asking and pleading and begging for favors. Do this, give me that, I need a new car, I want a better job. And most of this praying takes place on Sunday, his day off. It's not nice, and it's no way to treat a friend. But people do pray, and they pray for a lot of different things. You know, your sister needs an operation on her crotch. Your brother was arrested for defecating in a mall. But most of all, you'd really like to fuck that hot little redhead down at the convenience store. You know, the one with the eye patch and the club foot, huh? Can you pray for that? I think you'd have to. And I say, fine, pray for anything you want. Pray for anything. But what about the divine plan? Remember that? The divine plan. Long time ago, God made a divine plan, gave it a lot of thought, decided it was a good plan, put it into practice. And for billions and billions of years, the divine plan has been doing just fine. Now you come along and pray for something. Well, suppose the thing you want isn't in God's divine plan. What do you want him to do? Change his plan? Just for you? Doesn't it seem a little arrogant? It's a divine plan. What's the use of being God if every rundown schmuck with a $2 prayer book can come along and fuck up your plan? And here's something else, another problem you might have. Suppose your prayers aren't answered. What do you say? Well, it's God's will. Thy will be done. Fine, but if it's God's will and he's going to do what he wants to anyway, why the fuck bother praying in the first place? Seems like a big waste of time to me. Couldn't you just skip the praying part and go right to his will? It's all very confusing. So to get around a lot of this, I decided to worship the sun. But, as I said, I don't pray to the sun. You know who I pray to? Joe Pesci. Joe Pesci.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. Let's talk about stocks and books, actually. So this is going to be a comparison of managed stock mutual funds versus the index. And I am getting most of this, I think, from Common Sense on Mutual Funds by John Bogle. And before I get too carried away, I've been asked to repeat my recommended book reading list. The first one is The Richest Man in Babylon. You can get it paperback, audiobook. It's on YouTube for free, at least last time I checked. And it's a pretty old book. And it becomes very obvious that it's old when you compare it to some of the phrases we would not say today and some of the ways we would think about things today. So go in knowing that it was 100 years ago and it's going to be slightly different. If that's going to really bug you, okay, skip the book. But I like it as the starter book because it talks about kind of the idea of why you should save, why your money can do the work that you're not doing at some point in the future and get you to what I call, the everlasting nest egg, where your portfolio is big enough that you no longer need to work. And if you have the opportunity to get to that point where your portfolio plus maybe Social Security or a pension or other sources of income is big enough that you don't have to work, you may choose to work. You may like your work. You may not like your work, but you could still choose to do it. To me, that's the definition of being rich. You don't have to work for the purpose of earning money. The second book on my list of 4 is A Random Walk Down Wall Street. And just looked this up before I recorded this segment. By the way, there is a new version that came out in 2023. So you can get a pretty good revised update. This book, like all 4 on my list, are old. Now, like I just said, this one's been revised, but I'm not the biggest fan of the new hot trend because they usually don't work. Whereas these time-tested ideas and philosophies and strategies work really well. It may not be fast, but you can make a fortune slowly. So time is very important in investing portfolio. And that is by the author is Burton G. Malkiel. I may not say that correctly. Last name is Malkiel, A Random Walk Down Wall Street. The next book, the third, and by the way, I do recommend that you read these in order, the order that I'm giving them. The third book is called Winning the Loser's Game. And this book is just revised, well, recently, 2021. And of course, the first book is 100 years old. The second 2 books, Random Walk Down Wall Street and Winning the Loser's Game, have been around for 40, 50 years. By the way, Winning the Loser's Game is, I think this is the newest version, the 8th edition from May 13th of 2021. authored by Charles D. Ellis, and it helps us continue on our journey of learning more about investments. The fourth book is Common Sense on Mutual Funds. This book, written by John C. Bogle, he's the guy that started Vanguard. I think the first one came out around 2000, 2002, and the 10th anniversary revision, which is my recommendation, is 2012. It's been 12 years, and unfortunately, John Bogle has passed away, but I would love for someone to go in and do a 24, 22-year version, or the 2024 version or 2025 version. It's that important. The first three books, I don't care how you read them. You can get them in paper. You can get them in Kindle, audiobook, YouTube if available. Doesn't matter to me. The fourth one, though, Common Sense on Mutual Funds, I do very strongly recommend that you get it in paper. I think it's only available in hardback and audiobook and Kindle. But I mean, the paper version is hardback, so it's 20 something bucks. But the investment for your long-term portfolio, you will never regret the $24, $25, whatever it costs. And I'm going to talk about something in that book today from my Kindle version, but I also have the audiobook and the paper version. But the reason I suggest the paper version is that you're going to want to sit down and focus. You're going to want to read this very carefully and go through it and make sure you understand. It has a lot of fun information, but a lot of graphs and charts and tables and numbers being thrown out, statistical analysis. And that may in and of itself be a challenging thing for a lot of readers. But if you don't know the words, if you haven't learned or heard about the strategies and philosophies and ideas that were shared in the previous three books, it makes it really hard to read this and understand it. So I think I am on page 278, but again, I'm reading from Kindle, so it may not match. It's a section about stocks and stock funds versus index funds. And so one of the examples that he has here is, I think it's a 16-year period roughly from 1982 to 1998. Yeah, that's 16 years. And if you put $10,000 in the S&P 500 index fund, your $10,000 would have turned into $153,000. If you had it in the average actively managed mutual fund, your return would be $113,700. So in short, $153,000 or $113,000. You lose $40,000 because you had an actively managed fund. Now, that's assuming the average of the fund. And of course, there are some that are better and there's some that fared worse. The single largest factor, correlation factor, not necessarily causal, but I think it is the expense ratio of the managed fund. So the average managed fund, depending on where you look and who tells you, is anywhere from 1.2 to 1.6, 1.7%. And of course, managed funds are managed and they trade a lot. So the taxes are higher. That's not even considered in this analysis. So trading costs are higher, tax bills are higher and more often because of the trading activity within the fund. So it just, I don't know. To me, it's a straightforward thing. To give you some more detail here, I'm going to continue on, again, still in Common Sense on Mutual Funds. I'm going to occasionally slip in and out of reading and or paraphrasing. So I wanted to make sure that you know that some of this, if not the majority of this, is not my original content. I'm reading from this book. Let's see where I wanted to get to. I'm now around page 287. This is called Funds That Have Beaten the Market and dash the Disappointing Reality. So during that previously mentioned time frame, 1982 to 1996, from his research that he did, John Bogle, the author of the book, only three funds, or about 1% of the funds, have a statistically significant outperformance of the index over that 16-year time period. So once again, there were 258 funds that were alive in 1996 that were also available in 1982 that were basically U.S. stock market, total stock market or S&P 500 kind of funds. Didn't do anything particularly creative, no leverage, no splits, calls, puts, any of that fancy stuff. Just buy and sell, but try to beat the market. So 3 of them had a statistically significant number of beating the market. But John Bogle, like we're friends. Hey, John Bogle then said, you know what, let's look at the top 12 because 3 is such a small set to draw anything from. One of the next things that he points out, and I've talked about this, it's early performance bias is what I'm going to call it. So he has these 12 funds. 6 of them had great success in their first couple of years when they were very small, and then underperformed the entire rest of the time. But because their performance was so good in the first couple of years, you can underperform dramatically going forward and still be able to show a 5 or a 10, or in this case, a 16-year performance that's superior to the market. So you start with a $100,000 portfolio. In 1 year, it doubles to $200,000. If you make no more money for the next 9 years, you could say over the last 10 years, it doubled. Well, it did, but it all happened in the first year. So these were funds that may not have been generally publicly available. You didn't know about them. You had no real way of knowing that they were winning that 1 year unless you have a broker. And then, of course, as soon as someone recommends a fund like that, the fund then underperforms. So even half of these 12 funds did great in the first couple of years and then didn't. So that's one thing. The other thing, of course, is a thing called survival bias. And so there was 258 funds in the example because that was what was left after 16 years, starting with the funds that were available. And again, we started in 1982 with this set of data. So the available funds was much smaller than it is today. But 258, but there were 126 other funds that were available in 1982 that didn't make it to 2016. So they were excluded from the analysis. Maybe one of them did better, but probably the reason they don't exist is because they didn't. But I don't know that as a fact. But that's 32% of all the funds that were available in 82 were not available in 96. And so that is survivorship bias. The next thing Bogle does in his book is he talks about the next 10 years because the book was revised 10 years after the original version. So this takes us up through the middle of 2009 because the revised version was 10, 11, 12, something like that. And it turns out that even the funds that did well didn't do very well. And again, I don't have this number right in front of me. I know it's on one of these pages, but I'm trying to do this without reading the entire text to you. But something like only 2 of the 12 funds matched or outperformed the market over the next decade. So even when you start with this incredibly small set of 12 funds that not even statistically beating, because only 3 of them statistically beat, statistically significant overperformance compared to the index. But you look at this 12 that all did overperform the index, look at them 10 years going forward, and only 2 of them continued to beat the market. So even if you did the data, you looked at the data and said there's these 16 funds, or there's these 16 years of data, and here's the 12 best funds. You pick them, you only have a 1 in 6 chance of buying the 2 funds that overperformed the market for the next decade. Now, it doesn't have here the data, but I would wager that if you take all 12 of them, and because you could say, well, I don't need to know the top 2, I just pick the top 12. Collectively, the top 12 underperformed the S&P 500 going forward. So the historical data shows you what did happen. What did happen? What happened? But it's not useful information because even with that information, if you pick those specific funds, you're going to underperform the market. That's just the way it tends to work out. That's what the math says. And the reason I'm doing this segment now is because it's come up a few times from listeners and or even a couple of clients. And of course, I get the sales pitches in my email all the fucking time about brand new funds that have beaten the market in the last 3 months, 12 months, whatever. It doesn't matter. You have no way to know in advance which funds will beat the market. The odds that you pick a winner are vanishingly small, and it's just not going to work out. And of course, like I said, this doesn't even include the tax consequences of having funds that buy and sell stocks, because you have to pay more taxes as each year goes by. So over 16 years, we had 1%, 3 funds out of almost 300 that beat the index over just 16 years. So the compounding effect, and it's not just that 16-year period, but an additional 10 years, 26 total years, it's really, really hard. Almost impossible to beat the market. It does happen, but it could be, even though they are statistically significant, they just got to be the lucky ones, and you have no idea which 3 funds or which 12 funds to pick in advance out of several hundred funds. So that's why I like index funds. Now, in a given year, can you have something like 50 or 60 or even 70% of managed funds outperform a given index that they're related to? Yes, you can. But most years, that's not the case. And in the long run, it's definitely not the case. So I see no reason to switch or change my philosophy of trying to use almost exclusively index funds, because those are the winners. Those are the ones that have the low costs, they have the low turnover, they have the low taxes. And on top of all of it, they have the better returns. And that's everything I want in one neat little package. So that's just a brief update, reminder of the 4 books, some information about the statistical probability of a managed fund beating the index over 16 and 26 years. It just really doesn't happen. And we're going to something else. Once again, thank you for listening to the Phil Ferguson Show. I appreciate it very much. I think I may have mentioned it in the last episode. I stubbed my toe and apparently got a hairline fracture. But the different doctors looking at the x-rays disagree. But anyway, it seems to be doing much better. I've seemed to recover. So whether there's a hairline fracture or not, I appear to be over it. So that's cool. Am having fun and learning new things about cholesterol and sugars. So that's the new fun learning curve that I have in my life. Not particularly new, but apparently as I'm aging, it's getting harder to keep my blood sugar where it's supposed to be. And that's called diabetes. I happen to have type 2 diabetes, and it's generally considered under control, but I've been eliminating sugars and carbs the best I can, and the numbers stay the same. So maybe it would be worse if I had sugars and carbs, more sugars and carbs. I don't know. It's kind of squishy. So I've asked the doctor, and she put in a prescription for one of those continuous glucose blood monitors to put on your arm. And so maybe I can experiment and play with different foods and see which foods cause problems and which foods don't. I mean, I already know, I can't eat 40 Oreos in a day anymore. I'm so sad. But not only do I have to work on sugar, but now I have to work on trying to get the cholesterol back in line. I had been doing really well with that, but I had been so focused on trying to reduce carbs that I ended up being lazy and eating more meats instead of more vegetables. Although almost every day now I have a salad for breakfast. I used to have eggs and bacon and sausages and lovely pancakes covered in syrup. But I have a breakfast salad. So, there are changes. And the thing that was really weird is that I'm working out and exercising more than I have in decades, honestly, because I have a Bowflex machine and a Schwinn Aerodyne bicycle. I have the pool and or I go outside and get steps. It's been a little harder because we are in full summer here in Central Florida with mid 90s every day, most days anyway, with high humidity. So if I can sneak out in the morning, but then it's like 90%, 100% humidity. Anywho, I've been doing one or more of those things every single day. So when the doctor says, well, try to get physical activity 30 minutes a day, every other day. And I said, well, I'm doing 30 to 60 minutes every day already. And she's like, well, then your cholesterol shouldn't be that high. I agree. So anywho, just some little fun side stuff for you. The next episode might have a bit of classic Phil Ferguson show. I might be away from my office for a few days, so I may not have time to make an actual show. I'll probably have some original new content, but there might be a segment or two that is from the archives. So hopefully you enjoy that. Hopefully I pick something that you like that you haven't heard for a long time. But if there's show topics you want me to cover, you can always send me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com, and I can see if I can do a segment on that. And I will be at several conferences this year, still coming up. BajaCon in Canada. I will be at the FFRF convention in Denver. I will be at CSI Con from the Center for Inquiry in Las Vegas. So if you're at any one of those and you happen to see me, please feel free to come up and say hello. Until then, ciao. Or maybe I should say adios.
God poured his wrath on his son that day so that we could be made clean. The Lord of all creation became a man to redeem. Satan is prowling like a roaring beast outside. Christ defeated him, heaven knows he lied. Just look at me, the wretched man I don't want to be. Must me with zeal, I want to grow. He'll help me grow, help me grow, help me grow. Seek his face and trust him more. Help me grow, help me grow. The 12th verse of Hebrews 4.